Hello, my name is Bond Wonye. In this video, I'm going to use C# to quickly show you how to use the if-else conditions and nested if-else conditions to do your decision branching. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I've created a class here called if-else example just to save time. So we'll go ahead and create a main method here. So with static void main. Okay, so let's declare two variables, integer types. Let's call them x and assign a value of 0 to it. Let's do the same thing by declaring int y and I also assign a value of 0 to it. Let's write the instruction to the user to enter a value for x. So we do so now we should read from the console, read an input. So we could do x here's the read line method, gets the input from the console. Notice that there's an error here. This is because when you enter an input into the console, it reads it out as a string, so we need to do a little conversion here because our variable is of type int. So we could do convert. Okay, let's choose 32-bit. Okay, so the error has vanished. So now we've read an input from the console and assigned it to x. Let's print out the results. So do this is what we call a string concatenation. Let's repeat the same thing for y by reading an input and printing it out. To save time, we're just going to simply copy this and change the values to reflect y. So let's do that right here. Let's test up to this point. So we could do debug, start without debugging, or we could simply press Ctrl F5, works the same. I'll drag this from my other screen so you can see. So enter a value for x, so let's do 8. Okay, you entered 8, which is correct, so enter a value for y. Let's do 7. You entered 7, which everything works correctly. Okay, now suppose we want to make sure that the input for x is not less than 10 and is not greater than 20. So this is what we could use our first if-else conditions by going right to the point where we are capturing the input for x and making that check right after we capture the input for x. So we could do if x is less than 10 tell the user x should not be less than 10 and make sure that its x is not greater than 20 as well. So we could do else if x is greater than 20 Okay, tell the user as well. X must not be greater than 20. So if it meets the two conditions above, then we'll print X. So we can now say else we'll now tell the user that he entered X. Okay. Okay, let's check what we've done so far by inputting values that are outside of a boundary for X, both at the lower and the upper limits. So enter a value for X here. So let's do 8, which is outside of a boundary at the lower limit. So it warns us X should not be less than 10. Let's check for, we do start without the bugging. You can also do Control F5 for, you already know that anyway. So okay, so let's enter something above 20. So we could do 21 for X. So it correctly warns us that X must not be greater than 20. So this is good. But notice that regardless of what the problem is with X, if we fail to enter the right expected values within the boundary, it still asks us to enter the value for Y. This is because in the code presently the logic for Y is outside of the if-else conditions for X. So we could change that, for example, by making sure if we decide to make it such that the user is not even prompted to enter Y except every condition for X has been correctly made. So we can now take this block of code for Y, we can copy it, or cut it rather, and put it within the else. That's it, within the else condition for X, meaning that until all the X conditions are satisfied, and that is within the else condition for the X, only then can we ask the user to enter a value for Y. So let's go ahead and quickly test this out again just to see. So start without the bugging. Okay, let's do something outside the limit. So let's put 8. Now it tells us X should not be less than 20, but it no longer asks us to enter a value for Y, which is good. Let's do that for the upper limit. Enter a value that's greater than 20. So let's do 21. Again, correctly, it tells us that X must not be greater than 20, but it's no longer asking us to enter a value for Y, which is good. Okay, let's do some of the nesting here. Suppose we want to apply the same conditions we did for X to Y by making sure that Y is not less than 10 and not greater than 20. So we're going to come within the else here for X and nest that logic here, because remember that it's only after all the conditions for X are met can we even begin to talk about Y. So right here we come to where we are getting the input for Y, and right after we get the input we'll check the condition. Again, we'll do if Y is less than 10. Let's just simply borrow the code for X and change it to be applicable to Y. So we'll paste right here. So we could do if Y is less than 10, then say that Y should not be less than 10. Okay, and let's do the same thing for else if Y, I'm copying and pasting is greater than 20. So else if, okay, y is greater than 20, then we just tell the user that y must not be greater than 20. So we finally put our else. We will now accept and print. Okay, this will copy. Else, if the two conditions are met for y, we'll simply print out the value entered for y. So I'm going to cut it and paste that within the else condition for y. So let's quickly test by checking the limits for y to make sure that everything entered is within the allowed boundaries. So we do, okay, so remember, first we have to satisfy the conditions for x before we are prompted for y. So let's do that quickly by putting the right things. So let's put something 15, which is not less than 10 and not greater than 20. So in that 15, now entire value for y. Okay, so let's test y by entering something less than 10. So let's do 8. So you see, it tells us that y should not be less than 10. Okay, so let's check for the upper limit by entering something for y that is greater than 20. So again, we go the whole shebang of entering for x till we're prompted to enter for y. So we're entering for y. So let's enter a value for y that's above 20. So let's do 21, for example. Again, we get the warning that y must not be greater than 20. So up to now, our code is working correctly. Okay, so in principle, we could use this nesting method to continue to do deeper nesting. For example, if we had a variable called z as well, and we want to make sure that conditions for y were all met before the condition for z, or the inputs for z, will kick in. Just the same principle we used will come right here to where all the conditions for y are met. Essentially the same way we did for x and y. We will begin within the else condition of y by inputting the capture for z only after we've met the conditions for y. So you could this way nest deeper, 1 level, 2 levels, 3 levels, 4 levels, if you know what you're doing, depending on what your logic requires. And this is just an example. We used the x and y capture here, but it is applicable to other things in your application that you may need to resolve one requirement first before branching out your code to do a different thing, assuming that you're using if else condition and not a switch condition. Let me do one more thing here just to check which number is greater of the two that are entered. Okay, suppose I want to compare x and y to see which is greater. Again, we're going to do a little bit more nesting, and this time right within the else for y, because we've just checked to make sure that y is displayed right after meeting all the conditions for x and y. So I can come right here and do if x is greater than y, for example, tell the user console.writeLine x, this is concatenation again, is greater than, and I get the value for y right there. Okay, what if they are equal? So we could do else if x is equal to y, I could do enter the equal values. So that leaves with one condition. So else, the only thing left will be now that y is greater than x. So we don't need to write all of these little conditions anymore for the else. We can just simply do else. Console dot write line. Okay, y concatenate here is greater than, okay, there's a typo right here, the colon should be right outside. Okay, so we've got it all. So let's quickly test this. Let's enter right values for x, so say 15. So enter value for y, let's say 13. So it says you entered 13, 15 is greater than 13. Okay, that works well. Let's reverse it by making y greater than x. Okay, for x let's put 12. For y let's put 19. Again, it tells us what we entered, and it says that 19 is greater than 12. That's the end of this quick tutorial on nesting if else conditions. I hope it was useful. I hope it was useful to you. Thanks. Bye.